Hey guys, I'm back and I've got a video for you on the hand this time, and I can't really work on the hand without working on the forearm. I've already done a couple of videos on the forearm. Those two videos, which I will include in the link below, really focus on golfer's elbow and tennis elbow. And this one's really more about fleshing out the forearm so that the hand can find some relief. So if you want to skip ahead to the actual hand work, I'll include the time codes in the description below. But for now, let's dive into the forearm. So as I'm warming up the forearm, I'm really focusing on crossing over the wrist and crossing over the elbow. I talked about this with my previous video on the shoulder, that making sure that we as massage therapists, one of our jobs is to make a client feel connected. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is going to connect one part to another via the joints. And I think that crossing over these joints is just one more reinforcement of that connection that some people really don't feel. People feel disjointed, so getting them connected is a huge part of what we do. I've warmed up the forearm with a lot of the basic strokes, including my forearm, which I actually feel like is a great technique to warm up their forearm. It's like steamrolling their forearm. It feels really good. But now I'm sinking in with my thumbs, and for the first part of what I'm doing, I'm diving into the extensors. As you guys already know, the extensors originate at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, so I'm gearing my work towards there, using my left hand to stabilize my client's wrist. And then I'm thinking about the extensors, all of these muscles, as like pasta that has been cooked but not separated out, so it's nice and stuck together. And I want to slide through and separate those fibers out and start to break up some of those, like, I don't know, what is it that sticks pasta together, that carbohydrate starchy stuff. That's kind of what our connective tissue is here. You want to break that up. And then as I continue on, I'm crossing over the elbow, thinking about the brachioradialis and all the other elements that connect the upper arm to the lower arm, and helping my client feel like her arm is one thing and not separate parts. Kind of similar to what I was doing before, I'm bringing my attention down to the lower part of the forearm and separating out all of those tendons of those muscles. So the belly of the muscles are closer to the elbow and the tendons are closer to the wrist. And again, taking that stuck spaghetti and separating it out. Thinking about the friction of what I'm doing being like the water or the oil that causes that pasta to separate and be nice and loose. Remember those Indian burns we used to give each other in elementary school? Well, who would have thought that it's actually a fantastic myofascial release technique? And it is, and I'm sure the word Indian burn is not appropriate these days, but what we're doing is creating a friction in opposite direction among the connective tissue down the forearm. So go ahead and bring that back into your bag of tools that you use. So now I've flipped my client's arm over and I'm focusing on the flexors of the forearm. And as you know, they originate at the medial epicondyle of the humerus. So as I'm using my thumb to break apart all of that stuck pasta that we talked about, I'm guiding my thumb towards the medial epicondyle as opposed to up into the crease of the elbow, which can be actually a little bit painful. I want to make sure that it's a little bit broader here, my pressure, my point of contact. The medial part of the forearm can be a little more tender, so I want to use a little more caution here. I'm going to transition with a slight traction through the wrist, kind of setting all of that work I've done into place. I like to do that a lot. I really think it helps. And then the last thing I want to do on the forearm before I dive into the hand is dig down into the interosseous membrane. And that is the ligamentous structure that lies between the radius and the ulna. And I'm really sinking deep here, but making sure that my thumbs are accessing kind of the depth of the forearm. On to the hand. I'm going to transition from the forearm into the hand by doing some very superficial friction onto the wrist itself. There's not a lot of muscle tissue in here, so I just want to make sure that I'm nice and light with the work that I'm doing. And then I want to take my thumbs and my fingers and create some movement and opening in the carpals themselves. So I'm using my thumbs on the top portion and hooking underneath at the base of the thumb and the base of the pinky with my fingers, and just giving a little flick of the wrist here. This just opens the wrist up, opens the carpals up, and allows me to transition into the hand. I'm moving down to a technique I like to call breaking the bread, which I will break down for you a little bit more at the end of the video, but it's something I learned in massage school and still carry with me to this day. I love it. My clients love it. And then as I slide down either side of the hand, I want to make sure that I'm sinking into the pinky side of the palm with my fingers, and then I'm going to switch over to the thumb side of the palm and making sure that I'm giving detail to each of the metacarpals, starting with the thumb and the pinky. They're on the outside, and so they get the most abuse, and I like to give them a little extra love. I'm going to pick my client's lower arm up off the table at this point, and I want to talk about the way that we hold and how that can dictate how much your client can let go. So as I bring my client's wrist through some passive range of motion, if I'm using my right hand to grasp her wrist firmly and I'm using my left fingers to severely hook into the back of her hand, she's not going to want to let go. So I've got to hold with confidence, but at the same time allow my fingers and my grip to feel somewhat loose and still nurturing. So I think this is one of the more common techniques that massage therapists use in the hand, but the thing that I want to stress is that I'm really using my left hand here to hold the fingers into an extended position so that the palm of the hand and the fascia in the palm is nice and stretched out and allows me to work into detail. So here I'm working into the thenar eminence, and as I move over to the pinky, I can get into detail into the hypothenar eminence and make sure that all of those tissues and all of those structures are nice and long and stretched. You know what? This is such a great technique. I'm going to continue this down into the wrist. So I'm thinking about the flexor retinaculum and all of the tendons that dive underneath there into the carpal tunnel. And as I keep the fingers extended, that myofascial stretch goes all the way from the fingertips down to the elbow. Switching it up, I'm going to apply the same technique to the extensors and the back of the wrist. So making sure that I'm hooking in with my left fingers, but not so harsh that my client wants to retract their hand and make a fist and maybe even punch me. I don't want that. I am not by any stretch done with the work that I'm doing in the hand here, but I'm going to do a little more passive range of motion and then pull a lot of that energy right out of the fingertips. And I can do that with all of my fingers interlaced with theirs and just kind of pulling out and creating a nice snap at the end. I think this feels really good. I think a lot of people love this. And then I'm going to dive back down into the palm. I'm using a tiny bit of my body butter here to create a little friction in the carpals. So the carpals are a bunch of bones that have a bunch of ligaments that hold them all together, and they can get really stuck, and everything that we do with our hands can just reinforce a lot of that stuckness. So I want to create a lot of friction in here and melt that away. And then as I do that and move into the palm, I'm going to focus on spreading apart the pinky and the thumb. I'm going to offer another little tip here that I think is super effective. As I work down into the pinky and the thumb metacarpals, I want to extend that all the way into the actual digits. So making the strokes complete, even here in the hand, is going to feel deeper and more fluid and more connected to the client. I also just really do what I think would feel good, and I feel like, yeah, I would love this. I also really love detailed work, and one of the details that often gets overlooked is the space in between your fingers, right at the base of the fingers. So I like to do a little bit of a myofascial stretch in there, just acknowledging the base of the fingers and that they exist. While you're there, why not stretch out each of the fingers? We love stretches on our shoulders and on our legs and on our feet. Why not stretch out each of the fingers? So focus the pressure or the force on the proximal phalange, on the proximal part of the finger, and take each finger, pushing it in both directions, and making sure that stretch happens in both directions. Connective tissue doesn't have a linear force. It kind of goes in every direction. So the more stretching you can do here, the better. But, don't break any fingers. Pay a little extra attention to the thumb. I think there are 9 muscles that manipulate the thumb. I don't know. Do you guys know? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to do a little more passive stretching and include a pin and stretch here, kind of like what we did before. I think a lot of you know this move already. I just really love it. I think my clients love it, and I think it really reinforces a lot of the work we just did in the hand. So again, a lot of the tissues in the hand are an extension of the muscles that come down from the forearm. So connect them, make them feel loved, make them feel like they are working as one. Support the hand and the wrist as you bring the arm back down into a neutral position and get ready to do some finger jitsu, judo, ninja, kung fu, I don't know, get ready to work on the fingers. So there's this finger snap thing that a lot of massage therapists do with their first finger and second finger, and I'm going to walk you through it at the end of this video, but for now, I just am pulling through each of the muscles and creating a little bit of movement in each of the fingers, and just doing a snap with my thumb and my first finger. I feel like it's simpler, it's easier, not so complicated. I don't know why, but massage therapists get so wrapped up in that snappy thing. It feels good, but that's okay. I wanted to take a moment and focus a little extra energy on the thumb while I'm here, because our thumbs get really abused, especially with these tiny little computers that we carry around in our pockets all day, and the texting and the gaming that we do. I'm starting off by supporting my thumb with my left hand and using my right thumb to dig into what the trail guide calls the anatomical snuff box. It's that little area between the tendons of the thumb on the medial aspect, just creating space in that area and then drawing that up all the way to the forearm and making sure these get extended out, and all of the sheaths that wrap around each of those tendons can actually move. And then I don't want to forget about the most favored part of a hand massage for a massage therapist. I think we love digging into this area between the thumb and the finger, because we know it hurts us and we know there's a lot going on in there. And we also, if you remember from your Eastern theory classes, this is one of the most famous meridian points. This is your large intestine 4. This is responsible for letting go. This is responsible for release of emotions or physical stuff or whatever you want to talk about. I'm gonna spend some time here. I want to be really gentle and really firm at the same time. Communicate with your client, make sure that they are doing okay with this pressure, breathing through it, and understanding that this can kind of trigger a release on lots of different levels. Remember earlier in the beginning of this video when I did this thing that I called breaking the bread? Well, I'm gonna explain that now. So at the top of their hand, I'm placing both of my pads of my thumbs on the top and extending my thumbs up towards the wrist, but not putting too much pressure on, and pulling away from the center. And then on the underneath side in their palm, I'm digging my fingers in and separating their palm out, but oppositionally. So I'm going to pull down on the top of their hand with my thumbs and then pull their palm open with my fingers and repeat that process. All right, you guys, I'm going to attempt to explain that finger snap thing that I was talking about earlier. Start in the metacarpal, pull out all the way through the finger, and then you're going to take your first finger and lay it on top of the finger, and your second finger and lay it underneath and give a good squeeze. Use your thumb to assist, and at the very last minute, snap it out. And that snap that you hear is your two fingers snapping together, and that vibration and that noise kind of pulls in the other senses for the client, so that not only does it feel good, but it sounds good and that vibration feels good. It's just the complete package. Hey, so I've got a couple new things to look out for. I've got new labels that I'm working on for my butters, and I've also got a butter coming out soon that is geared towards respiratory and breathing issues, so keep an eye out for that. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to be alerted when I release a new video, please hit the subscribe button. Please tell your friends, because massage therapists, we rule.